Welcome to One Work, Five Questions with Donna Vitek. That's I.
That's it. God, there you go.
I would have said that's me. Oh, well.
We all
And
talk that way. It's just grammatically incorrect. Yeah, but you got it. But you see,
oh,
if
okay.
you watch some of the British old movies, you'll say, "It is I. It
Yeah,
is
but
I,
we
sir."
separated from them. Anyway, okay. And the grammatically correct Dr. Mark Holowchak,
Sometimes grammatically correct and
who is the brain
always grammatically obnoxious. But that much you can do.
you're the brains of the operation and the professor of philosophy
I
and
certainly am not. I
history.
certainly am not the beauty. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah, you are. Um, so Dr. Holowchak, for his credentials, he has taught at institutions such as University of Pittsburgh, University of Michigan, Rutgers University, Camden, and Ohio University. And you're also the editor of Journal of Thomas Jefferson in His Time and the author of numerous books on Thomas Jefferson. How many are you up to now?
I think 23 or 24. By the way, concerning the number of published essays, they're well over 200. I didn't take into consideration the certain formal essays that I have listed elsewhere. So I have over 200. I don't know,
Wow.
but yeah, that's wow. I was
Okay.
surprised too.
I've got a lot of reading to catch up on. I can't wait to the day I'm done with all of my testing and I can just read. And his list of books and the location of his essays can be found in the description of the video. So with our show One Work, Five Questions, I will ask Dr. Holowchak 5 questions on one work of Thomas Jefferson. And today's episode is on query 6 on the notes of the state of Virginia. And let me give you a brief introduction. Um, and actually, this is going to be, we said 2 parts. Today,
Yeah,
we'll talk
we're going
about,
to talk about just Indians. Indians. We're going to talk about animals that are endemic to Virginia, and then we're going to talk about human animals that are
okay,
endemic to the Native Americans.
okay,
This could be different from what we did before because we're going to look at Native Americans in terms of just going to look at them as creatures.
okay, okay. Um, so the introduction today, we return to Thomas Jefferson's sole book, Notes on the State of Virginia. The focus will be on query 6 and its productions, mineral, vegetable, and animal. That is the title of this section. It is also Jefferson's longest query, over twice as long as the lengthy query 14 titled Laws. That's because he was the King of Liberty. I'm joking. That was, oh, well, that was
He
my,
was. He was the king.
um, yet our focus will be on minerals and vegetables of Virginia, but its animals we're not going to focus on the minerals and vegetables, but the animals, humans included. But the native humans of Virginia will be the subject of next week's episode. So are you ready to begin, Dr. Holowchak?
I'm ready, and Jeffy's up here on my desk. He's dying to hear what Jefferson has to say, what the other Jefferson, dead Jefferson, has to say about the animals of Virginia. He wants to know if there were miniature pinchers if Jefferson talks about them as being the wisest of all dogs or all animals. I don't think you're going to get that,
Yes,
Jeff.
I think so. We can say it. Hey, if everybody else can change history, so can we.
If he were that wise, he would have run away from me a long time ago and found somebody better.
I
But he's not.
know.
He's attached to me, and I'm attached to him. He's my boy,
Yeah,
my
he's such a
buddy,
good
right?
guy.
It's up here over there.
Okay, the real Jefferson.
Well, the
Okay.
living one.
Question 1, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Thomas Jefferson begins with an account of the minerals of Virginia and turns to the plants of Virginia before he turns to Virginia's animals. But here he does something different than just offer readers a list of the Aboriginal animals of Virginia. He mentions to begin a certain big buffalo. Let me do.
Big buffalo, the woolly mammoth, right?
Thomas Jefferson turns to a story from the leader of the Delaware tribe. What's going on here?
Well, there's a lot going on. I mean, this is fun for me to talk about because this is Jefferson, technical Jefferson, and he's just talked about plants of Virginia, and before that, minerals. Now he wants to talk about the animals. And instead of, he's got more going on here than just introducing and listing the animals. He's got an axe to grind, and we'll talk about that in a bit, I assume. So he starts off with this woolly mammoth, what he calls the big buffalo, and he introduces a story of a chief from a Delaware tribe. I'm looking at my copy of Notes on Virginia here, and he tells of, the story that the animal whose bones were found at the salt licks. So the animals used to go to the salt licks, and Indians at the time, Native Americans, would actually try to trap animals by putting deposits of salt around. So when the animals would go to lick the salt, they could capture them easily. So the animals, the bones are found at the salt licks on the Ohio River. So he starts off with this long speech of the chief of the Delaware tribe, right, talking about an ancient herd of tremendous animals came to the big bone licks, and then they destroyed the bear, the deer, the elks, the buffaloes, and other animals. And then the great man, the great spirit from above, looking down, was so enraged that he shoots a bolt of lightning down, descended on the earth, right, to punish these big animals, right? And till the whole were slaughtered except the big bull, who presented his forehead to the shafts and shook them off as they fell. All right, so there's this Native American legend to which Jefferson refers to bring this, and of course he wants to add a little bit of mystery, right? So and he's also because he had great respect in the most part for Native Americans. He was awed by them when he met them in his childhood, and he wants to give the story some. He wants to fall back on the authority of the Native Americans, that this animal did exist and still does exist. So now notice when he goes to the Ohio River and so forth, he's talking about animals that existed in northern parts of North America, northern parts of the United States here, and that takes him away from Virginia, right? So Notes on Virginia isn't always about Virginia. When Jefferson wants to talk about something, relevant to his scientific appetence, he's going to talk about that thing, right? So he's turning to people like Comte de Buffon, who is the great naturalist, and Abbé Réal, and wants to sort of lock horns with them, right? Now, permit me to say some things on what he finds here. Other people think that this is the river horse, the hippopotamus. Hippopotamus just means river horse. Yeah. Hippos is horse, and potamus is river in Greek. And he says that the Tuscan skeletons have been ascribed by the naturalists of Europe to be the elephant, while the grinders have been given to the hippopotamus or river horse. And Jefferson is noticing many problems with this hypothesis. So is it two animals or one? Did the elephant die next to a hippopotamus, and we're mixing up the remains of this and that? Jefferson says, we must agree that these remains belong to each other, that they are of one and the same animal, that this was not a hippopotamus because the hippopotamus had no tusks nor such a frame, and because the grinders differ in size as well as in the number, it was not an elephant, I think ascertained by proofs. Right, so he goes on to describe why this is a lot larger and so forth. The grinders are 5 times as large as are the grinders of the hippopotamus. He says the animal is 6 times the size of the volume. Just means of, not the height necessarily, but just the mass of the elephant. So if this is an elephant, this is an elephant that's 6 times the size. And he's also going to say it's an elephant that lives in a cold climate. There's never been observed an instance of an elephant living in a cold climate. I could say more, but right, yeah, I mean, that's enough to point to certain. He's got doubts right off the bat. He wants to say this is an animal the likes of which we've never seen before, and he thinks it's still alive.
Oh, okay. Back in that.
Now, and I'll tell you why real quickly. Page 53 talks about the scala naturae, the scale of nature. He says, such is the economy of nature that no instance can be produced of her having permitted any one race of her animals to become extinct, of her having formed any link in her great work so weak as to be broken. Now, the Scala Natura means there's a scale, a ranking from infusoриans and very small microorganisms and so forth, all the way up to more complex, plants, and then more complex animals till you get to the most complex and the most unique animal, the human being. Right? So there are like links in a chain, right? You can see how, we talked about the link between human beings and orangutans and chimpanzees and things. So they were linked, and everything at the bottom of the chain really strives to work up, according to Lamarck, to the thing on the higher chain. And since God created all things so linked, this animal presumably must still exist, he thinks. He'll change his mind on that. But he thinks it still exists.
We need to go home for some buffalo. This reminds me of Fred Flintstone. Okay, question number 2.
We can weave old Fred into the discussion here sometime, Wilma.
Oh boy. Okay.
You don't need, huh?
Who was Comte de Buffon, and why does Thomas Jefferson have a beef? Beef. Get it? No, forget it. Beef with him.
The joke? Am I missing something? The beef?
Oh, I'm thinking of the big buffalo.
Oh, the big buffalo. You're hungry, right?
No.
For someone who's a vegetarian, you're not a very good. You're having very, very bad thoughts about meat eating right now.
Vegan.
Okay.
No animal.
Buffon was perhaps the greatest naturalist of his day. He was born in 1707. He died in 1788. So he was a contemporary of Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson visited him while he was in France. Jefferson was at some point, and they had, well, as you said, they had a beef. He wrote his Histoire Naturelle, the natural history, which was an attempt to sort of catalog and describe every single organism on the planet. He never finished it, but he lived in France and at a great palace, and he had a great museum. So he was the greatest naturalist probably of his day. I think it's without question. Jefferson considered him to be that. Now, his beef. We can see here that Buffon is going to be talking about the New World in certain ways. He's going to declare that the New World is colder and wetter than the Old World. The North America is cold. Why? Doesn't even have to go there to know that, because it's undeveloped. When you have trees, bushes, and all sorts of foliage growing, the sun can't get there. When the sun can't get there, it can't dry up the water. It can't dry up the water, so it's going to be wet, and without the sun, it's going to be cold. And Buffon claims, and Jefferson says that, Buffon says cold and wet are averse to biotic thriving, namely to living things. And Jefferson's going to jump on that. So according to that, let's work on the hypothesis that hot and dryness are congenial. Europe is hotter and drier, so you'd expect their animals in Europe to be better than the animals and the plants in the New World. Now notice this is sort of like a Hippocratic claim without even having visited. Jefferson's even going to say at some point here, did this guy even go to the New World? He's drawing testimonies from people who visited. He's going to say, but how accurate were these testimonies? Were these people really measuring and weighing? Or they say, okay, I just saw, I saw a calf here, and it was a cow, and it didn't appear to be too big. So, these are scientific hypotheses, and to make these claims, one has to have really solid evidence. Jefferson is questioning the testimony of Buffon. Now, Buffon makes 4 different claims that the animals in the New World and Old World are larger in the Old World because it is colder and wetter, and both are averse. Now, he's going to say right off the second claim, those found only in the New World are small. So if you have animals that are only in the New World, they're in on the whole, going to be small animals. Those domesticated in the New World are degenerate. So if you have animals that are domesticated, they're going to degenerate. And that follows that, say, if I took an animal over from the old world to the new world, it'll get smaller because it's living in a bad climate. There are fewer species in the new world. Jefferson's going to throw out the last claim and say, okay, that just doesn't seem to be right in the first place because he's going to be, Jefferson's studying this. Now, Jefferson says if cold and wet are averse to human thriving, that seems to be contrary to reason, because when plants thrive, when do plants thrive? When it's wet and cold, or wet and hot?
Hot.
Yes. So he says, Buffon, okay, strike one. So if the new world is wet and cold, then one of the conditions for biotic thriving, wetness, is there. And if the new world is drier, then it suffers by being dry, even though it's hotter, because hot and wet is when things thrive. So right off the bat, he is making us challenge what Buffon is saying. And so, so he says cold, hotness, and dryness, we have to challenge whether or not these things are let me see if there's any, he says nature, Buffon says nature is less active, less energetic on one side of the globe than she is on the other. He's going to question that claim. He says, as if both sides were not warmed by the same genial sun, as if a soil on the same chemical composition was less capable of elaboration. So he says the truth is that a pygmy and a Patagonian, a mouse and a mammoth, derive their dimensions from the same nutritive juices. The soil is the same, the sun is the same. Overall, we have no reason to think the climate is the same, regardless. But I do want to add that you can see how Buffon's assumptions are a priori. They're not based on experience so much, or at least not direct experience. And they do seem reasonable. If you have a large growth, the sun's not going to come in. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be, so it probably will be cooler and drier. Right? What does Jefferson do when he wants to cool things down at Monticello? He grows trees outside, gets underneath the trees. So I don't want to make Buffon to be a fool. He's the smartest naturalist in the world at the time, right? And so his assumptions, they're assumptions, not observable facts, and they're very reasonable assumptions. Did that go anywhere?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's got this beef, and there's a lot at stake here. What's going on with the new world? If the new world is an environment that's hostile to biotic thriving, then people moving there are going to degenerate.
Right.
As Abby read, it's going to be very bad. It's not going to be a good climate.
Right.
Now, Buffon will say, and this is what scholars miss quite a bit. Buffon will say in later writing, if it's people for a long period of time and clear it out, then it will be, and he does say this, it will be hospitable for biotic thriving.
Okay.
That was a long answer, it was necessary.
Yeah, no, more information is better. Okay, question number 3. Okay, that leads us to Thomas Jefferson's 3 tables. Tell us why he includes those tables.
All right. He is collecting. He has one table where he has animals of Europe contrasted with animals of America, where the same animals exist in both places. Then he has a table where we have aboriginals of one, where we have like the puma of America, which doesn't exist in Europe, and the wild, a certain species of wild goat, which exists only in Europe. So he's going to look at those animals and compare, and he's interested in bulk, in weight, in mass. And then the third table is continued second. The third table is animals that are domesticated in both. Now, he obviously is in no position, so he's, all things considered, taking the average bulk, say, of, in the first table, animals in both, like a bear. Right, let me see where he has the bear. yeah, he has the average weight of bear in England, in Europe, 153.7 pounds. And then he looks to America and he's got 410. But the 410s, it's got an asterisk. It's just not an average weight. What he's looking at is he's intentionally getting the largest size bear that he can get. Now, does that seem unreasonable to do that? Does that seem like he's stacking the deck? By picking where he's taking the average size bear in Europe, and then he's taking the largest found bear. Why is he doing that? Do you have any clue?
No, I'm trying to find the table. So I'm looking at it and I can
Well, it's right
possibly
out at the
explain.
first table. It's like the fourth or fifth one down. But the idea
Yeah.
is that if you think about it, it makes perfectly good sense. All he's trying to show is that if animals should degenerate in the new world, animals that you find in both you shouldn't be able to find a massive animal like a 410-pound bear. So by finding the largest known animal, he's refuting the claim that things degenerate or are degenerate in the new world. Shouldn't be able to find massive.
Right.
And what animal do you find in the new world that he just starts off with? Let's go back to the first question. What animal are we talking about? What animal did you just show picture?
Our woolly mammoth. I mean, our big
Massive
buffalo.
woolly mammoth.
Yeah, our big buffalo.
Okay. The new world has a woolly mammoth. Okay, Buffon, how do you explain that? And this lives in a cold climate. How do you explain in cold, wet area the existence of the largest known creature in the world, as the fossils indicate? And so it's very clever. He starts off with the woolly mammoth because he has in the back of mind, okay, you bastard, you think animals are degenerate here, that the climate is so bad. Explain the woolly mammoth because it shouldn't be able to exist here.
Yeah.
So it's a sock dolager. It's a pop. It's like, hey, I'm starting off, as I say in my book, by the way, we'll push that. It's in a boxing match, it's a knockdown punch in the first round.
Yeah.
Jefferson coming out and, okay, come on. Bam, I got you on. Round one, you're down. But he gets back up. And as I'll show later, he's not interested in knocking out Buffon. He's not interested in winning the bout, but he got that knockout punch in.
Yeah. With them.
So, I mean, each of these three tables, what he's trying to show, is that you shouldn't be able to find massive animals. Right? Look at the average wild sheep in Europe. In aboriginals of one only, we have a wild sheep 56 pounds, right? We have a elk, round-horned elk, which is 450 pounds, a tapir at 534. I mean, he's just trying to show, and then, the animal's domesticated. And he'll make a concession that, a cow in Europe, the average cow is 763 pounds. In America, one has been found to be 2,500 pounds. How do you get that, Buffon? A horse has been found to be 1,366 pounds. There has been a hog that's 1,200 pounds, a sheep that's 125, a goat that's 80 pounds. Not supposed to exist in the New World. So that's what he's trying to show. A lot of people argue that he's trying to disprove Buffon.
Well,
does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Okay, question number 4. Are you ready?
I guess so.
Okay. Thomas Jefferson seems to get the better of Buffon with his 3 tables, but you say in Thomas Jefferson's notes on the state of Virginia, a prolegomena. Did I pronounce it correctly?
You pronounced it correctly.
Wow.
I don't know what the hell it means either. It's a big word.
I'll just say this.
Like I told you before, that's my book. I love the book. I think it's really good. Beautiful cover.
It is. Well, let me move this over so it's not on top of it. It is a beautiful cover. I'd love
And
to
I
see
do
this in
have
person.
five. The book sells for over $70, hardcover, but I do have 5 copies, which I could sell for $40 autographed a piece, five
Oh,
dollars for shipping. So if anybody's interested, it's a really
okay.
nice book. And I call it Prolegomena because I just want to call myself not only historian philosopher, but a prolegomenist.
A prolegom. Now you're a prolegomenist.
Yeah, that put that at the end of your name. That's
Okay,
really kind of cool.
prolegomenist.
Don't you want to be a prolegomenist? Someone who can write a prolegomena?
I forgot what it means.
Yeah, things you need. Prolegomena is prolegomena is plural of prolegomenon, and it roughly means things you need to know prior
Okay.
to reading something else.
Oh, okay.
Like we talk about the chain of being, right? If I read that quote to you about there's no instance of in the great chain of being that if I just read that, and if I know nothing about the history of science, know nothing about the scala naturae, the scale of nature, chain of being, I'm not
Right.
going to know what's going on. Right. And there's a stadialism, the whole notion that humans pass through 4 stages or more or less. You have to know these things. You have to study the history of science to understand Jefferson.
Mhm.
You have to read Plato. And a lot of people comment on Notes on Virginia without having any background in science, which to me, you have to know Newton. You have to know
Right.
Bacon. There's
Right.
been a recent book where people come out and talk about how it's laughably silly thesis that the work is religious. It's based on the Pentateuch, and he's
Mhm.
basing it on the Bible. And it's just an empirical work. It has nothing to do with the Bible. Quit trying to read silly things into it. Look at it. He's using Bacon and Newton's empiricism, and he's
Mhm.
doing that in these tables. It's kind of brilliant.
Hmm. Okay, so in your book, let's go back. In Thomas Jefferson's Notes on the State of Virginia or Prolegomena,
Yeah.
that it is not Thomas Jefferson's intention, though everyone else disagrees. Explain.
Well, if you go to the secondary literature, and I do that in the book, and I put out a large number of quotes where Jefferson refutes Buffon, Jefferson destroys Buffon, refutation. He's not out to refute him. As
Mhm.
I said, he starts off with the big buffalo, which is a knockdown punch, not a knockout punch, right? I turn to a couple, I'll just read a couple quotes. Uh, he talks about some of the problems. Um, and he says one quote, he says, a true answer to these questions, and he's asking questions of whether these people actually went to the New World and studied the animals. And Buffon didn't, but he had other people went and looked at them. He says the true answer to these questions would probably lighten their authority so as to render it insufficient for the foundation of an hypothesis. Um, how unripe, listen to this, how unripe we yet are for an accurate comparison of the animals of the two countries will appear from the work of Monsieur de Buffon. The
Mhm.
ideas we should have formed on the sizes from the information it received for his first publications are very different from his subsequent communications. In other words, he's had volume 1 of his book, and in volume 5 of his book, he's revising all of it. So he doesn't even have his facts, right? And then he talks about later, he says, these are the only instances in which I have departed from the authority of Monsieur Buffon in the construction of this table. Pay attention carefully. I take him for my groundwork because I think him the best informed of any naturalist who has ever written. Now, if you say
Oh,
that, you're not out to destroy the guy. It's
no.
basically saying this guy knows 100 times more about animals and plants than I'll ever know. I'm not trying to destroy him. I'm trying to knock him down. I'm trying to
I just
show,
disagree with him.
there are flaws with his arguments.
Right.
The thesis that wet and cold are inimical to human thriving is false. The thesis is not false. We don't know because
Right.
I'm stacking the deck already by putting the largest animals, right? And I'll turn to another quote here. Find it. Okay. He says, This circumstance must be remembered where their weights and mine stand opposed, right? The latter being stated not to produce, this is the important, not to produce a conclusion in favor of the American species. He's got all these heavy ones, right? But to justify a suspension of opinion until we are better informed, and a suspension in the meantime that there is no uniform difference in favor of either, which is all I pretend. So Jefferson is working on the assumption that there's no uniform difference. He says, all I'm working for is not a he doesn't say refutation, is suspension of judgment. He's trying to say Buffon may be wrong. More data need to be gathered. Everybody else is wrong on this. You see how important it is to do analytic history?
Yeah.
You need to read one sentence, clears up all the confusion. As I told you, I sent out a paper with this conclusion, and the author threw it back. Well, this is not very interesting because all you did is say that Jefferson didn't aim to refute Buffon throughout the paper. That's your, he goes, how interesting is that? To me, it's very interesting when everybody thinks, right? If everybody thinks there's no harm to smoking, then someone comes up and say smoking causes cancer. That's pretty significant. So it goes in what I've been telling you, that good history is taking a small thing and just thoroughly working over and having an irrefutable conclusion. No one's going to be able to challenge me on this, because if you do, you're wrong, because of what Jefferson says there.
Right. That's, to me, you either do history that way or don't do it at all.
Well, people want to write the big thing. Yeah, Jefferson, Sally Hemings, sex, racism, because it gets you published, because it gets you on the cover of a magazine, gets you money. You become a big shot, but you're not helping us understand the person.
Right.
Anyways, that's my conclusion.
Oh, are we ready for question number 5? And we're almost out of time. We have about 6 minutes left. You also say that there might be a political motivation for Buffon as well as for Thomas Jefferson. Why is that the case?
Okay, well, this I can answer briefly. Rechylogously, your new favorite word. Look, people are moving to the New World, and it's like what's happening in Russia. A lot of smart people want to get out because of turmoil. Europeans don't want to lose their best citizens. You know, if we find out that the climate is congenial, there's a lot of opportunity to get land, to flourish in the New World. Some of the best people are going to leave Europe and go to the New World. And perhaps, I say perhaps, there's a political motivation by people like Buffon to show that the New World is degenerate. We don't want to lose our best people. And for people like Jefferson to show he can be politically motivated. There's no reason to think he is necessarily. No textual evidence to show that there's nothing wrong with the New World. So if, you know, some of the better people in Europe want to move here, please do.
That could be, that does sound, because at the end, he's saying that this is the best naturalist that he knows, but yet the guy was wrong about almost everything. So I think that does.
Well, remember, he's not saying he was wrong. He just says, from the tables I'm giving you, we have reason to think he's wrong.
Yeah.
We need more data. And remember, he says in your own Buffon, in your own collections, every time you come with a new volume, you come up with different weights. This is an issue that's not going to be settled by one book. It's going to be settled over decades or a few hundred years. So Jefferson knows that. He knows he's no Buffon, and he knows that this has to be settled empirically by careful study of animals. Pretty cool stuff. And I really dig this, show my 60s roots. I love doing this because this is the way you do good history. This is why I told you that most people were not going to buy the book. Who wants to go through these tables and look at weights?
Right.
I do.
Yeah.
Maybe you do.
Yeah.
But if you don't, if you're not interested in doing stuff like that, you're probably not going to be a very good historian, because good history is about, as I tell students about good philosophy, it's getting your hands dirty and doing the dirty work, doing the details.
Well, yeah, and that's how I feel about another, I think, a future episode that we plan to do at some point, because yeah, I really want to dig into the things that aren't there, that are there, that aren't, if that makes sense.
No,
Um,
I mean, you're talking about the racism, hypocrisy, and everything. See,
the
people
letter
want to
that
do the
Thomas
big,
Jefferson didn't write. That was going to be the
okay.
title of that episode.
But historians today want to do the big issue. Was he racist? Well, these are big, because we can categorically condemn the person.
Mhm.
Instead of just writing a paper on Jefferson's relationship with slave James Hemings, which has really never been done. I think that's a fascinating topic. No one really cares about doing that. Let's just write it on that and let the paper speak for itself, and we can go. I mean, that's doing the dirty work, but people want to say, no, he owned slaves, he was bad.
Mhm.
That's not very interesting as far as I'm concerned, but that's what sells
Right.
books.
So
That's
well,
that's
so there
why
may be
I'm in
some
poverty.
political. So now this opens up what may have been a topic that is very different from what we've done. This opens it up to see what if Buffon did have a political motivation to keep people from leaving um, the old world and coming to the new world.
I doubt that. I think he was too sincere. I mean, scientists make
Uh,
mistakes. When Jefferson writes
but I
his,
bet they could be paid off like they were like they are today.
it could be, but that's a big claim, and you need big evidence for that.
Well, that's what I'm
Um,
saying. This would make a good investigation, something further
uh,
to research.
I'll say quickly, Jefferson's always condemned in his advertisement, his preface to Notes on Virginia for false humility. He says the subjects are all treated imperfectly, some scarcely touched upon. To apologize this by developing the circumstances. So he's like false modesty. My thing is, and I say that if you've ever tried a book that long with that kind of detail, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. That's all. Buffon made tons of mistakes, and Jefferson, it will say later on, it's amazing he made so few mistakes. His
Yeah.
books are.
Well, yeah, I think as a scientist, you really shouldn't. There shouldn't be a lot of mistakes when you're putting information out there.
There are going to be at times in that what you do when you're doing. Look, I wrote the book on Jefferson in the Bible, and I say in the preface, I said certainly I will have made mistakes in the book because it's a large project. Hopefully they're few, but it's up to further researchers to disclose those. That's all. So you just be honest. It's not an easy book to write.
Right.
All right, we're kind of running out of time.
Yeah, we are. We're running out of time. So we have less than 1 minute. So our next
Did you
episode
want to
is
do the teaser?
Query 6, Notes on the State of Virginia, but the second half, and that's on Thomas Jefferson's views on Native Americans, on Indians in Virginia.
Yeah, and he's gonna look at skin color, brain, culture, all aspects, just the way in Query 14 he looks at blacks. And
Okay.
it'll be a fascinating. So please stay tuned for that. It'll be fascinating.